Hi guys, welcome. Today we have a small surprise for you. Instead of Jassi ji, I will be moderating this talk show. And today we have the Mr. KAI HORNUNG. KAI needs probably no introduction, but he just for some people who may not know him, KAI is a landscape and fine art photographer from Germany. In fact, from Hanover, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
His work has been published internationally and he has won several international awards. His photography style can best be described as his work varies from the natural to the unaltered images to the progressive and sophisticated editing, which always carry a feel that it makes his audience connect to it, emotionally connect to it immediately. He has many awards to his list, but I'll come to those awards later. I also want to introduce our other guest panelists, Hans Gunnar Asklaksen. I don't know if I got that name right. It's a little bit difficult for me, but Hans is a brilliant photographer himself, and he has kindly agreed to be our guest panelist today. Along with me on the panel are Prakash Kumar Singh from Dubai, Atanu from the US, Himadri Bhuan, and none other than Som Roy. So without wasting any more time, KAI, can I ask you to talk us through your images and your style of photography? And maybe we will have some questions for you.
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me in and having me on here. It's a true privilege and truly an honor to be amongst those other fantastic artists you already invited in. So yeah, I'll gladly talk you through some of my work, some of my images. And first of all, I just hope everybody watching is fine and you're safe. It's pretty rough times for everyone. This lockout is no fun and this disease isn't either. So I think you guys from Xploring Light, what you set up here, it's just fantastic. I've never seen anything similar. So I think it's the perfect way to help everybody kind of get through this phase, and let's all hope that things will improve soon so that we can start traveling and mostly be safe. All right, so just to for everyone, you in the panel, Hans, you too, and all the participants joining in, feel free to interrupt whenever you want. Ask questions, and we just talk through and take things easy and just have some fun here. So I'll try to share my screen. Let's see if this works.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, good. So I can't see the, now can't see the button, but now it's starting. Okay, fine. So yeah, I put together some slides for you to see some images, and I would like to have some various topics that I would like to talk through and maybe discuss with you guys. Some things that I found are important for my photography and potentially for anyone's photography. And from what I got is that you guys are eager to learn and to improve your own photography, and that's what I try to do too. It's been quite a journey, not a very long one compared to many other people you had on the show. I have not been doing this for too long. So taking a look back from where I come from, this is actually me being on stage with my band. And that's actually my background where I started to be creative. And that has been music. It's been almost 30 years that I've been in bands, making music as a singer and writing lyrics for bands. And haven't been on stages multiple times, having recorded some albums. And what I always did, because I don't have a really sound knowledge of music theory and things like that, I'm more like a intuitively driven person. When I was talking with my band members and trying to connect into songwriting, because we were always writing our own songs and still are, I'm still singing in a band, I'm using images to get my point across. So visualizing things, connecting emotions, connecting feelings has always been inside of me. First of all, many years musically, And then 2016, it moved over to photography also, which has been a hobby first. And here you see my, let's say my three lives. Here on the left, you see me as a business person. That's my regular job. I am working full-time as a human resources consultant. So talking with people is actually something that I'm used to, and also presenting things has been one of my main things to do in my job. So I'm kind of used to that. Then music has been on my side all the time, and probably not too many people in the office do even know that I'm singing in a band, or I have been singing. And not too many people in the office know that I'm traveling the world and photographing either. So it's kind of like three separate lives. My bandmates don't really care about my photography. So it's like this life, that life, that life. It's kind of strange, but for me, it all connects and intertwines. And I think it helps, or I discovered for myself that being in a really, not strict, but more serious business and working there has been in need of me having a creative side also, which is in music for many years, and then turned into photography. And ultimately, that's why I started with that point, my long introduction, me trying to get better with my photography and getting a artistic vision and a point across, or an emotion that people might be able to connect with my images. So that's like
three lives that you are leading, like Clark Kent of Superman. Do they help you doing the other one better? Is there a connection?
Well, there's one that that enables me to live. That's my business side. That's where I earn my money. Photography has turned into being a side job where I can finance my photography, which is a good thing. But it's music is pure hobby. Photography is hobby and passion too, but it's also turned out to be a side job. And then there's my main business, and also there's my family life, which I keep rather private though. I have two brilliant kids, and I like to share time with them too.
So that's a lot of eggs to balance. So a lot of balls in the air.
Oh yeah. Just I think 2 weeks ago, some guy was writing me via my homepage and asking me, Kai, I noticed you have a family life, you have a job, you have photography. How do you manage to even put out images and travel, and do your days have more than 24 hours? And I laughed when I read that, and I answered him. I said, well, you hit the nail on the head. It's I wish there were more hours than just 24 a day to being able to be even more creative. But there's like things when I back in 2016 when I started, I actually have an image here. That's where my landscape photography started. It's not an image that I'm really proud of, but it's probably the second or third exposure or shot that I took while being on a business trip in Ireland. Was the first time that I planned to go to a place and photograph during sunset. And that's, I could pinpoint like this being the moment when landscape photography started for me. And it went from there. And from there, when I was on business trips, it wasn't me that ended up being in the bar in the evening. It was me ending up in the hotel room and then starting to edit images. Or it was me leaving the place and walk around into the city and take some cityscape shots. That's, I found that more intriguing than having the third or fourth beer. And I spent my time on that. And also during travels, I studied countless tutorials, so many hours, practice. And whenever I could, go out and photograph. And I also have to admit that having a personal crisis in my life with my marriage that broke down and ultimately getting divorced, which has been not a fun time for me, like for who it is for. I mean, it's not a fun time for anyone going through this, but it ended up me having more time to do things on my own. And that's where photography came in. And that's when I started to take images like this. Like this one, I don't have a mouse here to show anything, sadly. So, and otherwise I would just show you some stuff that would really bug me today, and I would edit this image completely different, I guess. Border control to not have any grass strings in there, or make the image more sound color-wise, not have a blown-out sky and things like that. But again, I just wanted to show you where I come from, so that's actually where it started. Not the worst place to start with in Ireland.
It's a quite a recent image.
Oh yeah. And this was in 2017, a year later. I went to Portugal. That's the west coast of Portugal. And I went there early to get some nice light during sunrise, and it didn't look good at all. It was all murky and many clouds, and I liked the place. I was there the first time, and I saw this natural arch and saw the waves coming in. And then slowly the sky picked up colors. And then I had like a time window of maybe 3 or 5 minutes being able to photograph. That's when the colors were there, and they were really intense. So I was able to capture this image. And I know many people always ask, what gear are you using? Do I have to have a full frame camera? Do I have to have this and that lens? And I can tell you this image was taken with a Sony a6000. It's a crop camera, and the Samyang 12mm lens, which is a budget lens. Pretty cheap, but I love that lens. And this image ended up being as a large acrylic print at Photokina at a company's stand. So it works. You don't have to have the most expensive camera. Later I switched, okay, but that's a different story. But you see with that image, you can still make things happen. And then I started traveling, and I met people on Instagram. I love Instagram for being able to connect with people very easily. I have a bunch of people that I'm in touch with, I can say every day. Hans is one of them. Yeah. And on this tour, I was with Mass Peter Iverson, who had already been on your show. Mikkel Beiter, who say, Mikkel, if you watch this, hi. Is a great friend of mine now. And we traveled through the Dolomites and went up to this place. And I happened to shoot this panorama, which is actually a time blend and a, can you say, stationary blend, because I took the image of the rising sun and the Setcheda mountain first. And then like 15 minutes later, I had moved my tripod more over to the right. I noticed that the light beams were coming into this valley to the left side. And I took a couple more images from that and merged that together inside Photoshop. So if you ever go to this place, you won't be able to get the exact same shot, because it's done on like 2 or 3 meters apart from each other. So that's more a Photoshop work.
So that is one of the points I wanted to ask you, Kai. You travel a lot with Mass and with Mikkel, and all three of you come out with similar frames, but you all have a stamp of uniqueness about the same shots that you might have taken. How do you pull that off?
I think the three of us, and Hans as well. I was on a tour with Hans, and you can see some shots that I took there, and Hans might be showing some of his. Yeah, I think we all have a pretty clear vision of what our images will look like. Not necessarily when I'm in the field. It's not that I envision the image looking exactly like this one here, but still having some creative vision and some things that I'm taking really good care of, that is important to me. And I try to express this in my images, also in my edits. And Mass is the same, Mikkel is the same, Hans is the same. And I think every artist is or should be the same, having your own preferences, your own approach, and ultimately having your own style. So it's true. For example, with Mikkel, we go to the same places, but for example, I went with him to Iceland 2 times. We go to a place and then we just we just walk separate ways, like 102 meters apart. We just pick our own spots and shoot, sometimes ending up at the same spot, and still the images look pretty different. And I like that. I would rather be distracted if I had somebody with me and that person would end up with the exact same shots and the exact same editing. That would be kind of, I don't know, wouldn't like that too much.
Yeah.
So this one here, I was neither with Mikkel, nor with Mass, nor with anybody from my group. That's the Dolomites. And I was just so lucky to have this excellent conditions. Pretty much what you always envision when you go out into the landscape as a landscape photographer. A fantastic place, beautiful lake in front of you. It doesn't have this amount of water all the time. Sometimes in summer it's pretty dried up, but I was lucky that there was rain a couple of days before. So this mountain lake was a perfect mirror for what's happening in the back with that mountain in the light of the setting sun. Nowadays, and that's where I'll be switching over soon, I'm not even too crazy about having those fantastic dramatic skies anymore. And I try to shoot more independently, but that's still from a phase, I think it was 2018 in September, when I went to the Dolomites for the second time and I managed to pull the shot off, and I still kind of like it. It's a nice place. And no, I didn't place this tree stump there. It was lying there perfectly. Probably some other photographer did before, I don't know.
That's good. I have a question for Kai.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you, for the most part, you travel together with other people, but do you actually prefer to shoot alone, to be alone at a certain spot?
Yeah, I like.
Or do you feel a bit disturbed with other people around you and so on? Or to say it in other words, do you get your best shots when you are alone out there?
That's a good question. I like to travel with other people, with like-minded people, like when I traveled with you. I really enjoy that, and also going by car to the spot and then hike there. I wouldn't like to do that all by myself, but once I'm in the area where I'd like to shoot, I prefer to be by myself.
Yeah.
And rather stop talking and get a feel for the environment, like hear the birds or not hear anything at all, just watch the wind in the trees, and then kind of just get in touch, relocate to that location, and then try to see things. And sometimes it just really takes, I mean, this image here, it's pretty obvious. That's a pretty straight shot. I mean, you don't have to look around that much. So it's not too demanding of a photographer to take this shot. But with other scenes, for example, in a forest, there's so much chaos around you, and being chit-chatting with somebody else, or maybe on my phone and answering some messages on Instagram, that just wouldn't work. I wouldn't be able to pull anything off because I'd be too distracted. So slowing down, taking time, really scanning the environment, getting a feel, and then trying some images. That's how I work, and that's how I prefer to work. And that's also the great joy in landscape photography. It's getting off a busy life and then slowing down and relaxing. And that's what I really enjoy. I mean, for example, the music I was introducing to you guys, that's a rock band, and I've played in a metal band, and that's pretty loud and pretty busy. Yeah. And now quieting down, like standing at Trecime in the Dolomites, and you don't hear a single thing, maybe just a breeze that goes by. And I find that so awesome. And I just love being outside. It's not that it has always been like that. As a teenage person, probably if my parents would have told me, let's go outside into the wild, I would have gone like, what? Back then I was playing tennis all of the time. So I didn't care about this much. And on my first travels with my ex-wife, then we were just lying on the beach or doing the tourist destinations. So this landscape, love for landscape, this has developed itself, and it really started in Ireland, and now it's addictive. I mean, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's the same with you probably. Yeah. It's the most amazing thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Kai, one question from me for this image. Obviously the North American style, as they call it, would have forced you to go a little bit up ahead towards the branch and then probably maybe focus stack, right? And maybe, and I mean, probably a closer perspective on the stem, on the fallen branch, on the fallen trunk, so that it's more like in your eyes, right? Now here in this picture, you've got a lot of field between yourself and the trunk, and then the reflection starts. So what went into basically deciding this composition while you were there?
Yeah, good question. With my images, I try to have them in balance. So here I wanted to have, first of all, make sure to have main subject for me is the mountain with this cloud, and to have enough space in the midground. It's in between the end of the lake and the beginning of the tree stump. I wanted to have the reflection of the mountain without the tree stump interrupting this reflection.
Right.
And still, I wanted to have this tree stump at least touch the clouds so that you have a connection between the foreground element, the tree stump, which looks really cool because it's so old and gnarly. So to me, this arm of the tree stump that's reaching out into the reflection of the peak,
Yes.
The clouds and the peaks, it's like a connection into the midground and moving your eyes straight into the main subject, which is ultimately that fantastic peak with a
very thoughtful of you. It's very thoughtful.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. So still with those more epic images that I like taking, but you will see me swing to other kind of images that I'm more into now in a couple of minutes. This one, famous place at the Faroe Islands. I was there with Mikkel and Mads, and Mads even produced a tutorial out of this scene when we shot there together. So coming back to your question, Sandeep, when we have different styles and editings, we have images from the exact same moment, the exact same place. This spot is not too large, so I think we were 2 or 3 people by the most standing there. And since we had to have a guide, Thomas Wickrey, who took us there, we took turns in standing there. And once the sun was setting, I was trying to make sure to get the sun star in there. I'm not too crazy about sun stars anymore now, but back then I thought it was really cool. And to me, the star of the scene is actually the wave movement to the right. And I really took good care to have a shutter speed that featured the water movement in the back with the wave coming in, and still the water crashing down on the stones and creating those streams in this water motion. And that's actually what makes this shot most appealing, aside from the light crawling in on the left side. And that's my main attraction of this image.
Kai?
Editing-wise, yeah, I see a couple of flaws. I'm not going to point those out now to not take away the magic of the image, but you still learn, you still try to improve, and I guess I could do better than I did back in, when was it, early 2019, late 18 that I edited this one, I think.
Kai, could you tell us a bit about how you managed to handle the strong light from the sun? You're shooting kind of directly into the sun here. Which kind of approach you did? If you used the hand trick with covering the sun?
Yes.
So
I think I took the little cover of the lens, this plastic thing, and held it in front of the sun, so that I avoided the flares coming in. And I think from this very scene, I have like 60 or 70 shots. First of all, water movement. Then there was rain showers, and I had a gradual filter. You can see the darkening of the sky, which is one of those flaws that I would point out now. So I was constantly wiping the spray and the water from the rain showers off, and then also trying to prevent having the sun in there. So it was pretty busy shooting this one and pretty demanding. And then I think in the end, it's probably blending 5 to 7 shots together with the water movement, with the sun star, for the dynamic range, and all of this. So it's been a pretty busy editing here.
So it was also focus tagged? There was also focus tagging in this?
I think...
Because the rocks get really sharp.
Yeah, the rocks are really sharp, and I think it is focus tagged, yeah. But I'm not 100% sure because I was shooting with a wide angle. And yeah, it looks focus tagged, but the background is not 100% sharp, so it could very well be just exposed more like a third into the frame.
Okay.
Not 100% sure now. It's a long time ago that I picked this file up. Sorry.
Very nice.
Thanks. And now heading over, it's still those more well-known spots, which when you start with landscape photography, and that's how it started with me too, you were just crazy to go there and take your own shots. Nowadays, I mean, I'd still like to see those places and travel to them and just experience them, because I mean, if you guys, Sandeep, I know you've been to many, many famous places, and I know it from your images, and no image can compare to being there. Actually, it's just overwhelming. When you've seen those images and you're there the first time, it's just, it's like Christmas and birthday together. So actually, you don't even need a shot to have this great impression, and that's where I am now. Like with this place, it's the most famous spot you can photograph probably in the Faroe Islands. The internet is full of images from there. I took my spin, and I don't even know if I went there today. I might be photographing this place, but I don't know if I would even edit this anymore or put it out on the internet, because I would feel like there's so many images of that. It probably doesn't need a KAI HORNUNG image of that anymore. But still, what I wanted to show with this image is how bad light, or rather bad conditions, could turn out in your favor, because you don't see a dramatic, busy, fiery sky here. It's a cloud. It's obviously a long exposure, which helps softening the sky. And I think here, this cloud, which moves into the mountain, really helps framing the shot with the soft water and the soft clouds and a pretty similar color palette. I think this makes this image look more calm and more sound than having something like this. This is really busy. I mean, it's dramatic, of course, but I actually, image-wise, I prefer this one over the other one, because it's more sound, it's more in balance, and it's more in harmony with itself. And now with that one, which is probably the most iconic spot you can shoot and the most often shot place too, that's from the trip I went there with Hans. And there's always a good dozen of people on this bridge lined up next to each other, taking images of this fantastic place, Hamnøy at Lofoten, Norway. And I just tried to do a very long exposure here. And what I like about this image is the color palette also. And what I like is that it doesn't have a fiery, explosive sky. Because here, it's, again, for me, it's more all in tune. You see some detail in the sky to the right side. You have some structures of the cloud. And you have the colors which are in tune with the overall blue mood. And then you have the reds of the cabins really stand out. And this, to me, really makes the image here.
No, actually, the reds actually break the monotony of the image, and that is what makes it striking.
True. Yeah.
Beautiful.
But like I said, I did this on purpose to throw in the most famous spots, and some people might be going like, "Oh, another one who's shooting only the famous spots." And I can assure you, this is more a famous spot in Germany, but I will leave those soon. It's Hintersee. Sandeep, I think you were there too, right?
Yes, and you were the one who gave me all the advice on how to go and what to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that your first workshop, Kai?
No, I still do.
Yeah.
But that was a fabulous morning together with Mads and Mikkel. And I was there at Hintersee before. And there's actually one spot that's not even too large. There, you can stand there with like 4 or 5 people, and then this spot is like taken. So since I knew I had been there before, I left the spot over to my friends and some other German photographers that were there this morning. And I put my wellies on, and I stepped into the lake and just stood there to avoid any ripples and not to make those other photographers angry. And I just stood more to the right side. So this is rather a less used angle, because you do get wet feet. And I was just pure lucky to have this amazing light come in.
I do remember the story that there was some argument with some photographers.
Oh yeah,
at this spot.
Oh yeah.
So, tell us that story. Tell us that story.
That's how it is when you go to spots that are with high traffic. I remember Mass was being there, and I think he was also filming, and he was standing on a rock. There's a small rock inside the water, like on the little edge of the lake. And he was standing there, and he was going for different compositions. So of course he was moving. And there were two, how we call them, grumpy Germans that were there and complaining, and they didn't like that he was moving there. And so they started bitching at him, and they noticed that we were talking in English. So I guess they figured we wouldn't understand what they were talking because they were talking in German. So they were bitching back and forth and how stupid that acting was and everything. And in the end, when we were done, I mean, Mass, Mikkel, me, Roy was with us, Roy Jensen, and then Mass' girlfriend was also with us. And when we left, I just said, Auf Wiedersehen, which is goodbye to the German people. And I maybe some other sentence, but nicely, just to let them know I understand German, I am German, and I understood every word they said. And we had a good laugh back in the car about those grumpy old Germans, like what Mikkel and Mast called them then. I hope I'm not one of them. Yeah, little side story there. Yeah, now leaving those iconic spots and now more into the details and more, to me, more demanding images for a photographer. This one, not so much, because once you have trees lining up on a hillside or here on the mountain, actually on the low end of the highest mountain in Germany, which is Zugspitze. That was taken at Eibsee, which is a lake right underneath. And I had pretty bad weather that morning. It was slowly, it started raining and deep clouds. And I really liked those clouds with those autumn colors. So I just focused on photographing that instead of that lake. And that's what I really started to do more purposely, to exclude skies and to frame scenes more location independent. Because I mean, this shot could be taken anywhere, right? This doesn't need to be at an epic place. So this is where I take more fun of at the moment than shooting those iconic locations, is taking small and more abstract scenes. Like this one, for example. I mean, most people would probably recognize, oh yeah, this is Iceland, and it is. It's Landmannalaugar. But you don't even really notice if that's an aerial image or if that's taken from the other side of a mountain. In the end, it's an aerial image that was taken from a moving plane. Last summer, I was doing
You've mentioned that before. You were on a flight with Volcano Pilot and Michael Peter, I guess.
Yes.
And you have some wonderful images from that trip. So tell us about that. How did that happen?
Mm-hmm. I've always been in love of those aerial photographies that I'd seen from Iceland. And when I was in Iceland for the very first time in December 2018, together with Mikko, I said, well, you know what, Mikko, what I would really love to do is come back in summer and go to the Highlands. And I would be so crazy about flying over Iceland and take some images from a moving plane. I had never done that before, so that was my first time. And I made sure to be really prepared for that and soaked up every information I could get beforehand. And when we were up there for 3 hours, I filled my SD card with, I think, 2,300 images. Partly because I used continuous mode on my camera. So whenever I saw a nice spot come up in Iceland from the air, it's like every other minute, I made sure to have multiple exposures, like a machine gun, and just fired it away. And then in the end, choose on the computer. So I still have quite a lot of images to go through from this flight. And this one is actually an image I just edited last week. It's my newest image that I just finished. And to me, it's a new favorite because it's just a small detail of the landscape. You can't really pinpoint where it is. You don't even know what mountain, if it's on the low end or upper end. It's just structures, patterns, but it's organic. You see rest of snow. You see different colors, but it's still harmonious and it looks, like I said, really organic. and it has a depth, which was done in post processing. I did a lot of dodge and burn here to really make this come up and stand out, to make it more three-dimensional. And this is something that is really fascinating me now, to pick certain details of the landscape, make it more location independent, and then work those scenes out.
And if I'm not mistaken, you won an award, I think in the Epson panel, was it, where one of these aerial images were won you an award? Am I right about that?
I didn't enter anything into the panel awards last year, so no, not in that one. I think it was one IM or something, and then I went on to win first place in the landscape category for the German photographers, and I think it was 9th place in the world or something. But it gave me a little trophy to collect some dust in my home.
So later on, we want you to talk to us about how to enter award-winning images. Maybe we keep that for later after your presentation.
Oh yeah, because I would like to know myself. Let's talk about that later. We should have Mikkel Beiter on here. He would have to tell. Okay. But also from that flight, also the same area. I mean, once you go back to this image, you recognize the landscape of it. This being the river delta of the Land Manalaga area, and this is one of my personal favorites. Also, again, on purpose, no sky included, so this leaves the image rather abstract, and it's something that I tell people, well, you make yourself more open if you try to purposely exclude the sky from your frame, which is easier, of course, when shooting from a plane, because you, of course, face down. But here I could have given the sky someplace, and on some images I did. And then you give some orientation for the viewer on where you took this image and how wide the view and the depth is. And here I use the depth too. It's not a straight down image. It's more like, yeah, I don't know, 45 degrees probably. But I excluded the sky to have your eyes really go into this zigzag line of the riverbed and ultimately this otherworldly landscape, which is just unbelievable. I mean, those colors and those shapes. If you were a painter and you painted this, people would tell you, well, are you crazy? Did you smoke something? How did you come up with this? And then you see this and it's real. It's just unbelievable.
Very nice.
And this, Prakash, I think you were reaching out to me about this one, so I included this image.
Oh, yes. I have seen another image of this area. This place is simply outstanding.
It is, yeah. And actually, where you see my little watermark there, water sign in the end, which says KAI HORNUNG photography, like a few meters further down, and I have a version of this image where I still have this road on. It's right underneath. And there was the car parked where Mikkel and me were sitting in. And it was a pretty nasty day. It was raining, it was pretty windy. And I didn't even really know if I would pop up my drone and have a flight there, because conditions really weren't good for droning. But I did, and I went for this vertical panorama shot. And you don't see those red craters of the volcanoes when you're down in the car. I looked that up on a map to find where the place is, and then flew my drone and took those images. And you were right. I mean, this looks like completely out of our time.
Planet. It's a different
planet. I mean, if there were dinosaurs now, you would say, oh yeah, that's how I envisioned it when being a 5-year-old boy and still drawing little T-Rexes on my paper. It's crazy, completely crazy, and I would love to go back there.
So we actually sitting in your car when you fly the drone?
Yeah. Pardon me?
Did you sit in the car when you was flying the drone?
On that shot, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Ultimate laziness. But that was just due to the conditions.
Yeah. But there's no other way to take this shot. You have to be flying a drone. I don't think there's any other way to take this shot.
No, by plane. You can take a plane, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's no other way. There's no mountain nearby that you can get up this high to have this angle. There's no other way. That's true. Yeah, and Mikkel was, I mean, the raw files, you had raindrops on it and everything. So there was a major cleanup that I did on this image to get this result. And in the back where you see it's all hazy, that's also, that's rather how the conditions were really. And lots of raindrops on the lens. So not nice conditions, but I somehow managed to clean that up. And Mikkel asked me to give my raw file to him so that he could have his own spin on an edit. And yeah, that's what you do with friends. You sometimes even share the raw file. Yeah, and this one,
that's a crazy
this
shot.
is probably my favorite shot to this date. And just judging by the response I got on this image, it's probably the image that gets connected to me the most. It's also without any sky, without any orientation where this could be. This could be any country, could be any land. It is Iceland. It is actually taken on a place that was once called the Hidden Valley, where hardly any people knew where it is. And then it turned public on social media. And now there's many places, or many shots of this place on the internet, but not on this waterfall because it's on the other side. People always face the other way. And I was facing that way against that famous view. And I was just watching this waterfall. It was that time when I was getting accustomed to the place and just sitting there, enjoying the scenery and relaxing after hiking there. And Mikkel and me, we slowly were picking, setting up our stuff, placing our tripods, and then looking around, and I saw this waterfall and just watched the water cascading down, and noticed all those seagulls circling around. And I figured, well, I might just take a few shots and play it around with the shutter speed. And that's what I usually do when I photograph waterfalls now. I really take my time to figure out what shutter speed I prefer. There's not this one shutter speed you can take because it's ultimately connected to the speed of the water motion. And I ended up with this one that I like the most, which has still some structure and still has the dynamics of the water movement in there. It's just a fraction of a second, actually. When you go for 2, 3 or more seconds, you just have this one white stream. And I didn't want this here. Or no, here it's even, I think, 250th of a second or whatever, to have the bird in there too, because obviously you need that one sharp.
Kai, we have a question from YouTube. It's from Nakul Sharma. How much is it justified to add some light through PP in some scene, and especially to enhance the mood and feel? I mean, is that part of your editing to add light to a dull image?
It completely depends on the image. Like you said in the introduction to my work, I have some images where I don't really add anything. It's just, I mean, or I should start a different way. When you shoot in RAW format, which I always do, you have to edit your images. Otherwise, they're just completely flat. It's just a matter of the physics and the programming of those files. You just have to edit your RAW file to make it look halfway decent. A JPEG is a edited file within the manufacturer's settings. So of course I edit my images, but then I decide by the image, does this need something else that I see in this image to get my artistic vision across? This could mean adding some light, yes. This could mean not adding any light. Here, of course, I dodged and burned a lot. I made sure that you hardly see anything of the background. It looks darker than it actually was in the real scene. And but I wanted to have a more abstract feeling. So if you ask how to judge or how to justify on how to edit, I would say it's your file. You can do whatever you want. Be honest about it. I mean, I'm not lying about any editing, and I don't want to cheat anybody, but I have the freedom as an artist to decide whatever I want to do with my images. The difference is you, as a viewer, you can decide if you like it or not. If you have the opinion and say, no, that's too far for me, I don't like this much editing and I don't like the look of the image, that's perfectly fine. It's the same when you go into a museum and you look at images. I mean, there's people that look at a Picasso and say, no, that's not natural style. That his cubistic images, they're not mine, and that's perfectly fine. And then there's others that say, yeah, this doesn't look realistic. A woman doesn't look like this, but it's kind of cool. I can connect with it, and that's why I like it. And then I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, that's a good.
Not saying that my images are anywhere near to those classics, but
no, that's a great answer. That's very well put.
I do have a question on this image. Again, one of your most iconic shots, I think, this one. Right. So this bird, the positioning of the bird, there's a small black dent right behind the fall, the cascade. Yeah. Did you catch it by accident, or it's already there? Because that's what's really creating the contrast. The impact is because of that.
Yeah, it's two images and it's blended. I have this bird moved a tiny little bit to the center because it wasn't right in there. So that's something that some people would say, wow, that's not allowed. And I could never enter this image into National Geographic because I slightly moved the bird right into this little hole in the water movement. So yeah, I helped it a bit, but it's not that I painted that bird in that wasn't there. It was there in different exposure, but I just slightly moved it so that it perfectly fit that frame.
Okay.
Just makes it that position and the darkness behind it. It just makes it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's impact. Yeah. It's like like ghost engulfing the bird, right from one of those.
Exactly. That's very well put.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah, I call this image escape because there are so many levels on interpretations. You can see that this bird escapes the potential death threat of the thundering water, or that I myself as a photographer escape my busy life and just see those details in nature and whatever story you come up with. That's actually something that I sometimes miss when we landscape photographers talk about images. We talk so much about how to make those images and how to achieve results, how to edit, on what gear to use, on what settings to use. But sometimes we tend to forget on why we do it and what story is in there. And that's what I like to tell people that I'm coaching in photography is, first of all, I ask them, well, what's your story? What's the story of your image? And when I do portfolio reviews, I often go and say that that's a beautiful image, but what's your story? And most of the times the answer is, ooh, I don't know. Then I go like, well, if you don't know what the story of your image is, how do you expect the viewer to know what you want to portray in your image? So I think to really nail your images, you have to have some sort of story or some sort of, not even message, but yeah, a storyline or whatever, or a focus on what you want to bring across. If you don't have that, how should I perceive it as a viewer?
That's interesting, Kai. This is Jassi. I have a question, an extension to what you were just mentioning. When you let's say you go to a place, let's say it's not an iconic place. So iconic places are, I don't know what you think, but I feel that few compositions come on their own because of your imprints in your subconscious mind, and they guide you to click certain places in a certain way. Let's say shots like these. So when you approach a particular scene, what do you think? Do you have an end image in your mind, let's say you're talking about the story as well. So what is the kind of story that you want to build along with these kinds of images, and what is your approach initial, and how do you execute that? If you can throw some light on that.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and it's not so easy to answer actually. It's not that I'm behind the tripod on my camera and thinking of stories all of the time. It's more getting a feel of the surrounding and then portray little aspects, little scenes. Like you say, when you go to an iconic location like Hamnoy, that place at Lofoten, it's a beautiful place. But there's, I mean, you can come up with stories that's fishermen went there and built up those cabins and everything, but I think the story is probably taken because there's so many images out already. But with a scene like this, if it's not such a iconic spot in a scene you pick for yourself, or maybe those little, let's see if there's something else. This is more iconic. Wrong example. Let's take this one, or this one maybe. You pick the frame out of the chaos, out of the surrounding you are, and then you try to build a story from there. Sometimes it's more, I take those images and I go on purpose a little bit wider than I actually will be in the end image, because I know I need some reserve while editing. But when I'm editing, sometimes I try to take an image as a canvas, like a painter, and see where I can work it. For example, with that escape shot of the bird, I pretty much knew I wanted to darken the surrounding of the water cascades, but to have it really look like this kind of evolved while editing. And I like this process. So an image for me is done in two parts. First one is in the field. Obviously, you have to get the best there you can, so it saves you some work in the end. But I also enjoy the editing part and sometimes reworking in an image. If it's pretty straightforward, it's no problem. This one here, there was some editing involved, but I didn't alter the scene much. I did the focus stack and I cleaned up the tourists that were there on the side. And that was pretty much it. Made sure that the coloring was right. And then that shot was done. But some images need a little bit more direction, so that the story that sometimes evolves later inside my head, or the vision that comes across, gets through with the image. I don't know if this makes any sense when you hear this, but
no,
that's kind of
that's a very nice answer.
It does make a lot of sense, because it's very difficult to weave an exact story, and story keeps evolving, and I think it gets finished once you start sharing or getting your image printed, and that is probably when you put the final full stop onto your story. I think that's what also you're trying to say, that it doesn't necessarily evolve right on the spot. Yeah. So I think it's a wonderful way to put it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we have a couple of questions. Sorry, go on, Kai. Go on, Kai.
Just really short, and you don't have to think as a story as something really extraordinary with a story like in a book. It doesn't have to be that much. I mean, it can be, but sometimes it's just little fractions, and sometimes it can be a rather abstract story that only you understand. But as long as you have this vision in your head, I think this really translates in your image, and that's what I consider being a story in an image.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Good. So we have a couple of questions from YouTube, Kai, and I think you've answered part of this question, but let me just shoot it out. So this question is from Sarita Srinivasan, and she asks, can you show a series of images of a location and decide the final shot or composition or part of an image which works for you to create the final image? So I think what she wants to ask is that you are at a location, you've taken a series of images. Can you decide there what will form part of the image, or how will you create that image? I think that is the question.
Sometimes I know right away when I'm at a location that this certain frame will be probably great if I don't mess up the edit. And then there's other times I more or less collect impressions of the place and go on different compositions. And sometimes even when I return from a trip, I go through them and I'm like, well, okay, this one's all right. I'm not going to delete it right away. This one's okay, save this for later. And like now with the lockout that I cannot travel, I go through those images. And sometimes I even pick up some framing that at first I thought was not really appealing to me. But now I see it and think like, oh, wait a minute. Back then, when I saw this image first, something appealed to me while I was there. Then when I looked at the computer, I didn't really feel it anymore. But now that I see it again, I have a different viewpoint. And now this vision, this story, somehow pops up. And sometimes I pick up images now that are 2 years old. I mean, of course now, because I don't really shoot much anymore at the moment due to those conditions. But this as an answer to if I know right away which frame or angle will be right, which won't. If I think an angle doesn't work or a composition doesn't work, then I don't shoot anymore right now. I just don't go out and go click, click, click. That's how we all start, but that's not how I work anymore. Now I want to make sure that anything I photograph somehow makes sense to me. That's not guaranteed that this image works in the end, but it does in the moment. And then I have a look at that later on the computer and decide ultimately if I go from there, or if this will be marked with an X and then deleted afterwards, or if this will just marinate and rest. And I was talking with Mass in an interview I did with him on YouTube. He said, well, when he gets back from a photo tour, he edits the images that he feels are the best right away. And I said, well, I'm kind of the opposite. Like this one from Dranganir, the Faroe Islands. I knew this one was a great scene. I wanted to make this image great. And usually those images lie and wait for me. In that interview, I was also talking about a night shot I did at Tenerife last year. It's now pretty much a year ago, and I still haven't edited it because, first of all, I know it's a lot of work. There's a focus stack, I think 12 different focus points on the image, and then there's the night sky. And actually, I don't like editing night skies because I think there's just so much work with the white balance. But also, it's those images that I feel this will probably be or could be really good. Don't mess this up with your editing, and take your time and have it lying. And so sometimes it's waiting for me for a year or something. Yeah.
Okay, good answer. So on the same note, we have one question from Somik Datta. And Somik wants to know, what is your opinion about introducing an object from outside into the frame? So maybe he's talking about compositing, or maybe adding objects that were not really in the scene. So what is your philosophy on this? I know it's a much argued philosophy, but everybody has an opinion, and everybody is entitled to their opinion.
Yeah. First of all, hi Sumik. I don't have anything against doing it, but it's not something that I do anymore. I think when I started in 2016 and 17, I have a few images where I exchanged skies, but the satisfaction of having such an image is not the same as with an image that I know that I took things as were there. To me, it just feels different. If I have a sky that I actually photographed and I work the light that was there, it feels more real to me than just swapping that sky and do something completely else. I mean, with night shots, you sometimes have to do that because it's just the technical aspects. When you shoot the foreground and shoot the sky, you have to use different exposures. So you kind of swapping skies anyways. That's maybe also why I don't do that much. But first and foremost, with an image, I want to feel happy about it myself. When I finish an image like this one, I want to feel happy myself. I want to feel satisfied with the end result. I don't want to satisfy anybody else, except if I'm shooting for a customer. Then I know this image, if I shoot an image of a hotel and give this to the hotel because we have agreed on a deal, of course, I want the customer to be happy. But if I shoot images like this one that I consider as a artistic work, then first and foremost, and actually exclusively, it's to satisfy myself. And if I think, well, it doesn't really excite me to swap skies, then I don't do it. And here, I wouldn't add a bird or anything. It's also with the same, the images, like the one with a waterfall, and there's, I think, a few more. I have seagulls in there. And I know, for example, with Lumina 4, you can add, I don't know, whales and birds and auroras and everything. And that's a fun thing to do, maybe, but I don't do that. That's no fun to me. And not even that it's all fake. It's just, it doesn't satisfy me. So why should I do it?
That's a wonderful answer. Kai, I have one question. I think that is probably I would know the answer, but I think it is for the benefit of all the viewers out there on YouTube. You mentioned that raw files are very flat. So has it ever happened to you that you were browsing through your bridge or whatever Lightroom, wherever you do that, and you missed out a potentially good image just because it didn't appear to be so good in RAW while you were browsing, and later on you regretted it?
It hasn't happened to me because once I delete the file, it's gone, and I don't go like, oh wait, wasn't there an image that I deleted like 3 months ago that was great? Then it's gone. So potentially I might have lost a few, but I'm not so crazy on deleting images. It's like when I return from a photo trip and have maybe 700 images, I probably delete 200 and 500 still stay. Then there's like maybe 50 really real keepers to me, and then the rest is like, okay, I might be doing something later. So so far there hasn't been any regret yet, and I hope it stays that way.
All right, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. This image here in the background, just as another example that doesn't have a sky in there, and it makes it more abstract. And I think, to me, more appealing. You don't have that surrounding, and this could be a lot. And when I posted this one on Instagram a few days, a week ago, somebody was asking me, well, could you give me some orientation? Is that a large waterfall? Are we talking meters here, or are we talking centimeters? Maybe the grass kind of gives it away because that's some sort of scale for you. But not having this orientation, if it's big or small, I kind of like that because it gives a more mysterious feel to those images. And right where I am right at this moment, I like this approach to photography. Like this one, a rather simple scene and taken at a iconic location, but facing the other way. I was shooting a really, really marvelous sunrise at Zeiseralm in the Dolomites, which has this iconic mountains, and I really love the view, and I had the conditions that I was hoping for. And yes, I took a couple of shots of this iconic position with the rolling hills and the mountain in the back and the little huts. I haven't edited those yet, though. But what I edited was this one, and that was facing down a valley where you have this light coming in from the side and lighting up the little ridge line you see on the very left side of the image. That's what's so important for me to keep this image in balance, is the subtle light on the grass. And then, of course, there's this little pine tree, which is the focal point and is accompanied by the little shadows in the back with several other trees. And to me, this is it's a much stronger, a much more satisfying image just for myself than another shot of the iconic mountain. And this is something I could, my mind starts and could tell you stories and would make up stories. And
this one looks beautiful.
Thank you. And this one, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Great action here. A little keynote magic. It's a rather simple forest scene from a morning here in northern Germany, and I was envisioning shooting the heather fields that morning in the hope of low fog, and I had low fog, but I hadn't really scouted the area, and I was there for sunrise. And you know, if you don't scout an area and you go there for sunrise, you are asking for trouble because things could happen in a way that you are not prepared to. And so was that morning. I didn't find a spot that I felt really great about shooting, although the conditions were awesome. So I was getting a little bit hectic because I did something wrong. First of all, I didn't scout properly, so I wasn't really prepared. I was kind of late to the scene because it required 2 hours of drive and 1 hour of hiking to get to that area. So And I had expectations to go to that place and really get a great shot without even knowing where. And that's probably the worst you can do, to have great expectations and not be prepared. This doesn't match. And ultimately I ended up where I deserved, not getting a great shot at first. Right on the right side where the light's coming in, there's a big field with heather blooming and little bushes and everything. And I tried to shoot something there. And more out of desperation, I stepped away from this field and walked into this little forest. This looked kind of nice, but the sun wasn't up yet. So I went back, tried to shoot the scene I expected to get, but didn't. So I was getting frustrated. And out of frustration, I stepped back into the forest and I thought, well, just look what you find there. And I saw this scene and I took this photo. So this, first of all, is an image that really satisfied me later. I think it's a really gorgeous scene, of course, made possible by this incredible light coming in with the fog, but also a very good reminder to not have high expectations for a place if you're badly prepared, or maybe just a good reminder to not have any real expectations when you go out shooting. And in the end, just having your eyes open and adapt to what's around you. And for me, stepping back into this forest and still exploring the surrounding and taking things as they are. In the end, I got rewarded, right? I mean, I got the shot, so it turned out nicely, but there was a...
It turned out to be a good day.
It turned out to be a good day out of frustration at first, yeah. So a lesson learned, I would say, and lucky ending or happy ending with a pretty nice image. Yeah.
So there's a question about colors when you edit an image. Do you believe in following the color theory, or
Yeah.
and how do you decide whether to go for analogous colors or contrasting colors? How do you base your decision on that?
Well, the image itself dictates pretty much where the colors will go. And of course, I do believe in the color theory. I think as a aspiring photographer, you should be doing that. I mean, look at some articles or maybe some stories. For example, Erin Bartnick is teaching. She's a master of color. Ted Gores also, who was on a couple days earlier. And if you work colors carefully and purposely, you can really make a much stronger impact, because colors are attracting the viewer to certain spots of the image. Saturation and hue and saturation does in the end. And you can guide the view. And when you start, you usually make images more saturated than they really have to be. And it's much more striking. I mean, Hans, for example, Hans is a master of color work. It looks so sound and it's so extraordinary beautiful because of his fantastic color work. And
I like to keep it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
I like to work with a few colors as you can. So if you, for example, got a nice sunrise and some cold shadows, you got this seascape, for instance, blue colors and maybe some oranges in the sky. I like to keep it complementary, kind of orange bluish. Yeah, and if you get some yellow spots in the sky, so I try to hue those, drag it over to orange, keep it as simple as possible.
Hans has the signature pink tone as well.
Yeah, I had a pink period.
It's the magenta, Hans.
Yeah,
That's true.
Mr. Magenta, I think they called me.
We'll keep it for a session.
Yeah. Yeah, I was.
Kai, I had a question.
Just
Regarding
want
your...
to say, Hans is so true, and that's also here. I mean, it's warm and more yellowish highlights and more bluish and cold shadows, and that's something that I work on almost every image. And you have, like inside Lightroom, try to use the HSL sliders, hue, saturation, luminance sliders, and try to get your colors more in order and to make them more compact. Shift colors more, that they're more separate from each other, color contrast. And you can work the profile slider, profile calibration slider at the end of Lightroom also to work the colors, because this is so impactful. And there's also a tool in the internet, in the web browser. You can go for Adobe Color. It's a free tool. You can load up your image and have this program analyze your image with different color tunes. And then you look at the color wheel and see how the colors are separated. If it's all confusing, try to tone down those colors that are not most important to the image, and keep it, like Hans says, most simple. Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic answer. Himadri, did you want to ask something?
Yeah. I had a question regarding, as Kai was mentioning about expectations. He also has an article on his website, on his blog, regarding pre-visualization and lessons from failures. So could you elaborate a bit about that? Not just from this instance, the image that we have on the screen, but from maybe other instances, because you will see a lot of people going to a location with a predetermined mindset that this is the kind of image that I want, but then they come back dejected, or they come back feeling sad that what I went for, I didn't get it. So how do you deal with those kind of situations?
I think Hans and me know exactly what this person is referring to, because I mean, Hans and me, we have photography as a side gig, and we don't have all the time in the world to travel to one location and just take like 2 weeks there and go to the same place over and over and over again. So I think I know exactly what this person means is you have some limited time. You maybe go to the spot just once because your family wants you to travel on the next morning, or your wife says, well, do you want to get up early again tomorrow morning? This day belongs to the family, so please just get up and go to the breakfast together. So you have very limited time. And I know exactly what you mean. You go to this place and you hope for an amazing sky. You hope for the place to be as fantastic as you saw it on the internet. And then you're there, and then some things might be distracting. I know how this feels. This is disappointing. Right. My suggestion would be try to take the shot that you envisioned, just to have it in your camera, so that you can take this away, no matter if it's great or not, just to have it. And then try to have fun and throw away your expectations as much as you can, because I think in the end, we all want to have fun with photography. And maybe it's stepping outside into a forest and just play around. You might end up with a great shot you never expected to get. And maybe you are lucky and the conditions apply and you get the shot of the iconic place you went to this early morning before you get back to breakfast to your kids and your wife. Try to ease up a bit, because I mean, your happiness doesn't really demand a great iconic shot. If it would, then it would be rather a pity. But your happiness, I think, it depends on how much fun you have while shooting. So when you get up, feel the excitement. I do when the alarm clock rings in the morning and I know it's for shooting sunrise, I have a different excitement level than when the alarm goes on when I have to go to office, that's for sure. So just enjoy it. Enjoy packing your stuff in the evening. Enjoy grabbing your backpack in the morning and then head off with the car or whatever you take, and then hike to the place. Enjoy the surrounding. Enjoy the early sound of the morning birds and then the breeze. And even if the sky doesn't open up, so what? In the end, you're outside in nature, and it's a beautiful experience, hopefully. And just try to enjoy that, and then have fun with your camera. And if you end up with an image, that's a bonus. If you don't, you spend some valuable time outside in beautiful nature. Yeah. Am I right, Hans?
Try to have fun. Try to have fun without any high expectations. That is the crux of the message here. So Shomik, I hope that answers your question. And now I think let's move to the images. We have a lot of images to cover.
I have one question, Kai. Yeah. I've been going through your profile, Instagram, as well as the website as well. Now, when I compare these two images, also the previous one and the one which is right now on the screen, you have mixed bag. Few images are really saturated colors, tones. Then you have some images like these which are totally muted. You have very few, select few which are even black and white.
Because I struggle so much with black and white. That's why.
Yeah.
So any thought process, is it deliberate or you just do not bother? Because we've seen that anybody who's, especially on social media, there's a clear indication when you look at somebody's profile that somebody has been working very hard to keep the images look identical. There's the color palette and the overall, the way the entire stream looks identical, because they want people to look at it and identify whose profile are they at, or whose image does it belong to. And they do certainly gain by doing that in terms of their follower base and all. You have never given any thought to that, or whatever you shoot is random and you take one image at a time. What is the thought process behind that?
I will add a question to Jassi's question, and then Kai can answer both the questions together.
Yeah.
You have a phenomenal Instagram following. I think it's about 85,000 or something. I think there was a time when you were very actively following followers or something like that. But then I think there is a change that you are shooting more for yourself than gathering any following. Am I right in this understanding?
Yeah, I think those questions go together well. First of all, I was never shooting for Instagram, but shooting the more iconic locations like I did earlier, the images that I showed. Obviously, many people connected to it because those images were from popular locations. So I guess you get a wider reach to an audience. But I don't consider myself an Instagrammer, even though I love my Instagram community. And I know that my Instagram helps me a lot. But I don't care about having a Instagram grid that is all yellow, all desaturated, all saturated, or what. I want to have, I take it image by image. I still think that I have some style that people realize, oh, that's a KAI HORNUNG image. It's not jumping out of my own photography world completely. And I guess people would even connect, or at least some people would even connect with it if it was black and white. This comes really back to what story I see inside an image that I take. I don't care about if that image has a huge impact on Instagram or doesn't. I was a bit different when I started maybe 2 years ago with Instagram, or 3 years ago with Instagram. At one point, I maybe refrained uploading an image that I thought would really suck on Instagram, because I thought that might hurt my reach there or my feedback. But then I realized at times it doesn't matter what I put out, because sometimes it's like a lottery there. You get many likes on an image, or you share an image, and you don't get many likes. You repost that image 3 or 4 months later, and all of a sudden this same image blows up, or the other way around. And sometimes this can be like a funny farm. And I've seen people that really suffered from this numbers hunt. And that's not a healthy thing. So I post what I like. I still know that some images, for example, if I post an Aurora image, I might tend to believe this might be doing good on Instagram. So once in a while, I might be posting an Aurora image just to keep things going. And then I post a dead tree. Or I post a completely abstract image that I know will implode on Instagram. But I don't really care about those numbers. As long as people, there's some people, and luckily I have a great community, a small community that really seems to care, and I really cherish you guys, that give me nice feedback on those images. And if some artists that I really admire say, well, Kai, this image is really great, you picked this and that and really working to me. This to me is, again, way more satisfying than seeing my like count get much higher. And yeah, maybe my Instagram could be more successful if I followed some advice on having a really a cohesive grid and everything, but that would distract me way too much from my actual focus, which is getting better with my photography, getting my artistic vision across, and in the end, have fun with photography, because I think the fun shows in my images. Hans, how about you?
Yeah, I totally agree, Kai. It's too sad to let Instagram dictate your shooting style and what you're gonna put out there. So I think it's important as well to progress as a photographer, as you have done now. You started out with a classic wide-angle shots, a lot of epic locations. And now you moved over to the smaller scenes, more intimate landscape shots. That is natural progression, I think. And I can kind of scratch the surface on those smaller scenes now. I think it's really refreshing to try something new. I think that if you repeat yourself over and over again, I think you just will do worse. You will not progress, and I think that you will kind of get tired of photography as a whole. So you have to try new stuff, and as you say, try to have fun and do things that you feel is fresh and nice to do. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really wonderful answer, and I think there's a lot of learning there for all the viewers out there.
Many people are just trying too hard. I mean, every other day I get messages. How can I be big on Instagram? Could you give me shout outs because I want to grow on Instagram? And I usually reply, just have fun. Don't worry about those things. Enjoy photography. Too many people care too much about those numbers, and if you're in for the numbers, you're in for trouble. I'm a strong believer, if you put out quality content, you're nice to people, something nice will come back to you. And that's as simple as it is.
Absolutely, I think.
That's the mantra.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Okay. Any more questions in the chat? Or
no, let's have a look at the images and then we come back to chat.
All right. Okay. So I was starting to refer to the skies, and again here there's a more moody sky, and here is another image I took while being on tour with Hans last year, February in Lofoten, and another seagull. I didn't paste them in; they were there. And about breaking those so-called rules, there is no real rule of thirds or anything in here. The sky is a bit larger than you should be advised to do, but I did that on purpose to have it more, to give it more impact. So sometimes people ask me, well, what rules should I follow to have an impactful image? And I think it's good to know those so-called rules, but it's also important to sometimes just forget them and to do things differently. And this one here is composed in a different way. Again, it's not a colorful sky, and this image doesn't have almost any colors, but it works because of this great cloud, which looks like a smoking peak or something, like a volcano with those circling birds. Also, on a rather smaller scene, the people who've been there recognize it's Lofoten, but it could actually be the Alps or somewhere else also. And then there's shots that are sky dependent, of course. When you shoot a night sky and you want to cover the Milky Way or the aurora like I did here, of course you have to include more of the sky. But it's still composition that is very important. Some people ask me, well, how do I photograph the aurora and what settings do I have to use for the sky? And besides telling that, I always give the advice, well, make sure you have a decent subject and a decent composition in your image, so that the aurora is just a bonus, or the Milky Way is just a bonus to your image. The image itself has to work. Imagine your composition in a way that you could shoot this during daylight. And if you say, well, this composition works no matter how the light is, then I think you're good to go. And if that adds up with a aurora sky, when you're lucky to get one, I think this comes together just fine.
I think that's a very important point. Treat it like a landscape, a normal landscape.
Exactly.
What you just mentioned is a huge statement, because I've seen images taken by some photographers who go to Iceland and Norway and click auroras, and they have no perspective. showing, they just click auroras for the sake of it. I think what you just mentioned is a huge point for everybody to really understand. And it's not only about aurora. I think it's also about every the approach that you must have for every landscape image. I think. What do you say, Kai?
Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Yeah. Thanks for this.
And composition-wise, you can work with elements that come into the scene as well. I mean, this wave in the foreground, that perfectly shapes inside this image here. I mean, the horizon line is pretty much dead center of the image, which is usually not a good thing to do. But here, I think to me it works because it separates the image pretty well, and you have a pretty good diagonal line from the wave motion going into the mountain and then mimicking up in the sky. And I think this line combination works pretty well together. So this happened more or less while being on the beach and then sifting through the shots I got. And that's another advice I could give. Choose your composition with the elements you find at the spot and take your time. This takes time. And this takes, with wave motion, this takes maybe having to press the shutter with shutter remote, whatever you use, a couple of times, maybe 80 times or whatever, to capture a scene like that. Just Hans, like you are a master of seascape. With how many frames do you end up when you come back from one scene?
Well, too many. It's really a drag to go through all those images afterwards. So I always, as you say, when I do seascapes, I shoot in continuous mode to have all the steps of the wave, all the action. And I always used to maybe blend 3 or 4 shots to get the right movement through the image. So I blend those in Photoshop. So I do a lot of exposures, usually from 1/4 of a second to 1 second when it's about to seascape. So it's filling up SD cards pretty fast.
It is, yeah. Well, another point with skies, I hear the voices of landscape photographers in my ear that say, "Ugh, I got a bad sky, no clouds." And I go, perfect. On this image, I don't want to have any clouds. Imagine a busy sky behind those mountains. It would completely unbalance the scene. So there's some moments where it works, but imagine this sky behind those mountains, it would be a completely different image. And I like the harmony of this scene because the sky, the blank sky really frames up with the foreground where you have the snow really nicely. Your eyes are instantly drawn to the center of the image with the color and the light, and there you have no distraction in the sky. And I think this works perfectly fine. So again, be open to what you find in the scene. And once the sky is clear, you can still manage to get really great shots. You just have to work your scenes differently. Choose something maybe more busy to have the eyes of your viewer more in the image itself and not care about the sky. Here, obviously, the story itself is also that sky. Actually, the only great moment we had with light, Hans, last year, right?
Yeah, we had one day with great light and
one day, one morning,
crazy.
Yeah. And then you go wider and include more sky into your scene. But with that here, that story is not about the sky, and I like it that way. It's make yourself sky independent. And then again, with the more abstract scenes, here's no sky at all. Some people ask me what it is anyways. It is the blue, it is water, and it's patches of land in the late sunlight. It's also an aerial I took from the flight across Iceland, and it's the golden glow of the setting sun in those patches of land reflected in the shallow water. And this looks more like a, I don't know, could be an abstract tapestry or something. I really, really like that. And that's those intimate scenes I was talking about. Also this one, this looks like a Mark Rothko painting to me. an abstract artist, painter that I've always admired. And this is also taken during that flight in Iceland. It's soil on a riverbed, and those different sediments washed out deliver this interesting coloring. And the structures are just structures that are done by the water movement. And this gives you no orientation once you look at it. It could be a painting, but it's painted by nature, and that's what really attracts me.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And this is probably a more common scene because many people shoot those. Those are those river beds, or not river beds, but those streams of water in Icelandic rivers. And they look like arteries or something. It's really, really fascinating patterns. And those are the kind of images that I would print or do print and hang up my own walls, not the big fantastic scenes. I go for those rather. And this one also, inside an Icelandic river, I took out more color of the water. It was a bit more milky than it is here. Here it's more white, but it looks like a medallion or something. But it's also a piece of land surrounded by streaming water. Really abstract stuff.
Incredible.
And then here, I mean, there, you could argue, is that a sky or not? It's fog, obviously. And that's another tip. Hans and me were referring to that one question that was asked about how could I take images inside a busy life. I was on a conference with my regular job. And in the morning, instead of going to breakfast with my colleagues, I set my alarm clock earlier to go out for sunrise. I had my camera gear with me. So I stepped out to the field and went for a walk for half an hour or whatever, and found a foggy field as I had hoped. And I took those images of birch trees in this autumn morning, and it turned out to be one of my favorites.
Yes, I really like how you have used the muted colors to your advantage as well, Kai, on this one. I think that a lot of these abstract shots and the smaller scene works very well when you have complementary colors. Like the cool that resides and the warmth that brings it out. So it looks very good.
Thank you. And if you had asked me maybe 1.5, 2 years ago, I think I wouldn't have been able to process those images to my own liking, because I had struggles with the amount of contrast.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, when you start editing your images, they usually look pretty crunchy and you have lots of saturation in there. And leaving that out on purpose and not having a contrasty shot is something that might scare you away, because it's more to the actual raw file, which is rather flat, and then have little accents, little hints of color, like you pointed out, Hans, like those little leaves there, or little areas in the shot that are contrasty, and others really not contrasty at all. Those together work really fine, but it took quite a learning curve for me to figure that out and to be comfortable doing this too. That's also fun about not only photographing, but also editing. And this one, more of my recent images, it was taken in December 2018, and I just edited this a couple of weeks ago. So you see some images just lie around for a while. And here I shaped light pretty much. I did a lot of darkening and a lot of dodging. So having a story in an image, again here, I called this one Edda, which refers to the sagas that are in Iceland. Something I like to do with places I really feel a connection to, like the Dolomites or Iceland. I try to get more into the backgrounds to learn a bit more about culture and history, to read information about that, and just learn about the past of the place. I think that's so satisfying and so interesting to enrich my own experience of what I see in the landscape. And so I came up with this saga-like thing, that maybe those little peaks in the mountains are like little trolls guarding that mountain peak or whatever. And I think sometimes stories can shape up that way too, when you know the past of a place. for example, when you walk along the Dolomites, can you imagine that this was a really big war zone, not 100 years ago, or it was 100 years ago, that people were actually killing each other. Their Italians and the Austrian armies were standing face to face, and they had tunnels in the mountains and everything. When you are there and you see those tunnels, it's just, the hair on my arm stands up because I think it's so crazy. It's so unbelievable. But it gives those places a story and a history. And also for us landscape photographers, the responsibility to treat those places with respect and to leave them as they are, and to treat those people that live there also with respect. It's, I mean, for us European sons, I think it's such a blessing that we have the European Union, that in normal times outside of Corona, we are able to travel freely. I mean, what a wonderful time we are living in, actually. I mean, 100 years ago, people were shooting each other. There were no open borders. And now we can just, in the normal times, we can just take a plane and fly to Norway, and I can hook up with you and go shooting in a culture that's completely different to mine, and just enjoy that. A little manifest here to open borders and open minds. I think that's something that we landscape photographers, I mean, like us here, we connect with each other. I'm in Germany, Hans, you're from Norway, and you're in India. We're here together. This is so fantastic, and this is also a great joy. And
photography connects everybody.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Exactly.
I was wondering, Kai, another question. Do you always name your images?
Yes, I do. Not all names are really with stories connected. Some are just stone and clouds, or water on a river, or water in a river. Water in a river. What a dumb name, but you get the point. This one here had a deeper meaning with a name. But I'm so bad. Sometimes I look up for image files, Photoshop files, and I forgot the name, and I never find those images again, because once you have those PSB files that are larger than the regular Photoshop file, you don't even have a preview on your computer.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like there was this shot. I know I edited it halfway, and I want to go back, but I never remember what the name was, what I gave that name, and I'll never find it again. Damn it! I just edited back from scratch.
Yeah. Yeah, but that can be a good exercise to name your pictures. But I think that those pictures will have a strong story. Is easier to name. So
excellent advice.
I think it's all about emotional value of the image, mostly.
Yeah. Again, here, if you look closely, it looks like dust spots, but it's again circling seagulls. I seem to have a knack for that. I think I'm coming to the end of my little image show here. That's Madeira, a tree that's not standing anymore, as I learned from people that have traveled that place during the last, I think, 1.5 years.
That's unfortunate. Very similar to what has happened in New Zealand.
Yeah.
They've lost the tree.
But I think the one in New Zealand that was
it's still there. Down. Yeah, it was, I mean, it survived. There was an attack on it, but it survived. That's a good news.
Talking about respect to nature and your environment. I mean, how stupid can you be to attack something like that? But I heard this one here fell in a storm. So I was lucky to shoot this one. It's actually during the day. It's the sun behind those clouds. It's on a high plateau, and so clouds move in every other time. So often you get these fog-like conditions, which are actually clouds on this high plateau, and you find those magic conditions at this place. I would love to return. I was there in 2018, and I think I hope I upped my photography game since then a bit, and I would love to see what I can come up with now.
Specifically on Madeira, I had a question around in terms of scouting and basically spot selection. Madeira offers a lot of seascapes as well, right? But I just haven't seen, like from you, or I think Daniel Cotton was there sometime back, Enrico was there. I haven't seen any seascapes. Why is that? Like from Madeira?
Yes, it's surrounded by water, obviously, because it's an island. But I have a few seascapes, but those seascapes usually lack a really good focal point. I mean, you have like the land on the side, so you have to shoot a bit to the coastline to include something into the shot. You don't have those fancy sea stacks much. There's one place in the north that is pretty well known, but it's really tricky to photograph. First of all, usually the waves are pretty rough, and then you have big stones you have to walk on, and they're really slippery to get close to the water level. So that's what took me a bit aback to shoot this place. And also I had some tricky light there, so I ended up taking some images but never released them. And out in the east, it's really high cliffs, maybe 100 meters high or something. So you can shoot seascapes, but not those with waves coming in because you're just too far away. So yes, Madeira is a perfect place to photograph and really diverse, but not so much a seascape festival. You can shoot better seascapes at your home probably, Hans, or close to where you live.
Well, it sounds like I'm lost without my wide angle, you know. So yeah, I have some local spots I've been to quite a few times. So.
You got an article on that, right, Hans?
What?
The local spot that you keep shooting, the seascape.
Yeah.
Like I mean, Ole has the red house, red cabin. I think you have that spot. So
yeah. I know Ole Henrik Kjellstad that you have had on your show.
Yes.
I've been to his place and shot the red cabin.
Yeah.
And he has to visit me down here and visiting my place. So yeah, but that's a nice thing about. As we mentioned earlier, when you have work and family and so on, not so much time to do photography.
True.
If you have some local spots that you can go to, the spots I go to is 5 minutes in the car and 5 minutes to walk, so I can just head down there when the light is good and when I actually have the time. So
that's a luxury, Hans. That's a luxury.
Yeah.
It'll take us 5 days to get to a spot like that.
Okay. Yeah.
You're making us feel bad. Not helping.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. How are we doing in time? Is it all right?
We are almost on 1 hour 40 minutes.
Okay. You just pull the plug when you say, well, this guy keeps talking and everybody's asleep now. So I think this is probably the last one here. That's like the first and only image I've really photographed this year and released this year. And it's really different to what I usually do. And it's not that I will change my style, but I just want to show and come back to that have fun with your photography point that I wanted to bring across. Here I used a technique that was probably invented by an artist named Pat Ventosa. He's a photographer. I bought some fine art prints from many years ago, but before I even started with photography myself. And it's you walk around a subject and took multiple exposures, and then you blend them together inside Photoshop. This really gives it a impressionistic appearance, and it looks like it's moving. It looks not so distinct. Some guy was telling me it looks like a strange Orton effect, but it's not. It's those multiple exposures blended together, and it's something that I just tried. It looks completely different also because of the color palette, and it's more bright than my usual work. But I really enjoyed this one. And it's not that I'm gonna go full on those now, but just to say, well, do what you want and play around. Be open for different things, and especially now that you might not be able to go out and shoot the locations you would love to. Just saying that, actually, I was planned to be in the United States right this moment, together with Mikkel and Mass. We had a 2-week tour to the US coast already booked, and we had to cancel this. Obviously, I'm not in the US, as you can see right now, as nobody does travel. So make the best out of the situation, go out and try different things. Maybe you can come up with crazy stuff like this one, or something else you wouldn't think you would ever photograph, and bring the fun back and just enjoy. And that was fun, actually. And it looks so different to what I do usually, but I still kind of like it. Yeah. Okay, I think the calm water series flight just maybe is a closer to what I'm showing, because I would love to see a few images of Hans before I take up all the time here. That's also a different thing I did to make a series of images. And earlier you asked about cohesiveness and about having images look the same. Here I did a series of images. I think it was 6 or 7 images, and I loaded them up on Behance, not Hans. Behance from Adobe. And that was a lot of work to have those images look really similar. I took them all in one morning from a boat that was going across Königssee in Germany. Really foggy morning that helped with the horizon, of course, but still different locations as the boat was moving in different times. So the sun was coming in, and to have those images look really similar to each other was quite a lot of work inside Photoshop. And actually, I'm always happy when people tell me, oh, it looks natural and doesn't look that much Photoshopped. And when I know I spent like 2 hours or more working on that to make it not look as edited as it actually is. And I think here it looks really simple, but it's something that was a lot of fun. And once I was finished with that, also those are images I took in late 2017, and I finished doing this year, coming back to how long it sometimes takes me to finalize images. This here was a lot of satisfaction for me to finalize and to finish. And that's something I see myself going into even more from time to time in the future, to do series of certain aspects, abstracts, and feature that.
Yeah, I found this series really inspiring myself, and I think that it's such a strong and gentle work. And I think that the images works so good as a collection, as a series, than a single image. So that's a new way to kind of putting the masterpiece together, I guess.
The collection itself means more than the actual image, or let's say musically, the album itself means more than the single song. And like you say, that's a different approach, but I really like that. It's not that I want to do this one exclusively and not do anything else, but to add this up from time to time, it's really, really good. It keeps you focused and keeps you with different inspirations also. Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, okay. All right. I guess I have something about editing this one, but it's up to you. And I would love to just see something.
Quick run through, Kai. That would be great. A quick run through. Then we can see one of Hans's favorite images.
All right.
So that gives Hans some time to pull up a favorite image.
Okay. Okay. I'll try to be quick here. This image, one of my probably most popular images from Tenerife. It's obviously a forest scene, really eerie looking, ethereal. Has also been shortlisted on the Sony Awards. So just to show you guys what I did, now I have to switch the screen here because I see you guys. No. I have your faces on the text here. I can't really even see what I wrote myself. So this one was after editing the image in, I do it from what I remember now, inside Lightroom, Photoshop, and also used the plugin Lumina. Back then it was version 3. And to show you the before and after, this is straight out of Cam. This is how it looks. I think earlier I was asked to show a before and after, and here you have a fine example for that. Most of the time, I deliberately underexpose the files just to make sure to have the highlights recoverable. You see the EXIF data here. That was before, and just a comparison here again, the after, the final result, I think is quite a change. This one being absolutely an image that I edited a lot. This one falls into the category where I do a lot of editing inside an image. So to give an, oops, too fast, give an impression, just straight out of Cam, version and the one I did inside Lightroom. So I do the pre-editing, the raw adjustments also always inside Lightroom. This is what I did here. And to go through, I hope I can read it myself. Yep. I spend a lot of time in adjusting the white balance. This can take me quite a while, juggling those sliders. Then always balancing the exposure to capture the dynamic range to make sure I have enough information in the shadows and also recover the highlights. To balance the scene, make it rather flat to work inside Photoshop later, but to have enough room to really work that out. Here, I also increased the haze by getting minus dehaze, minus numbers on the dehaze slider. Should work, let's say it that way. Adjust saturation, hues, and luminance to work the colors. And then the basics, lens correction, chromatic aberration, and things like that. And also some minor sharpening. And then head over to Photoshop. And inside Photoshop, let me see if I've, yeah, here's the comparison. Inside Photoshop, the image on the right, you see I worked, I did a lot of dodge and burn. Just look at the wood and the green moss. I really lit that up by dodging. I burned some parts in the darker areas to give it more contrast and more depth. And what I did here mostly, look at the bottom, look at this way. I couldn't place myself any differently than I did on the left side because I was hitting a wall, so I couldn't move more over. But you see that this little path isn't completely straight and it's not really centered. And I changed that inside Photoshop with some warping to center this walkway, to really, the story of the image or the name gives it also, come on in, to really guide you in, to have your walkway into. So the light is leading you, sucking you into the image, and this walkway is leading you straight into. So I made sure to have the proportions of it fit nicer. Also, look at the trees. It's like a tunnel. It's more even now in the final result. I did that inside Photoshop, of course. Then if you look down deeper, you see some branches or even this little, looks like a gate. You see that in the back on the right side on the left image. I cloned that out, also cleared up some of the wood in the corner. And most importantly, on the forest shots, I closed the gaps where the light of day was coming in. Look on the left side, you see some bright spots in the canopy. In the final image, I closed those spots to have a more impactful, more intimate, and more dark, sinister feel. Then added some Orton effect to have it more glow. And yeah, I think that's, and then warming up the highlights, in this case with a green tint, and cooling down the shadows to give it a more striking, impactful appearance.
That is really impressive. That is really impressive foresight and vision. It's really an example of your great vision, Kai. That's a fantastic image.
This is one of the rare occasions when I placed myself there, I envisioned this scene looking pretty much as it did in the final version. It doesn't happen that often, but when I was standing there, I had a big smile on my face because I knew this will look great because the atmosphere there was so tense, and I just loved that place. And I was pretty happy with the final result then.
Thank you, Kai. That was just a wonderful rendition, and I think two things that you have said have always struck a chord with me. One is that you make the viewer feel the world that you are standing in and the mood, and also you want your images to sing. I think you managed to do that beautifully and with such aplomb without trying too hard. So thank you very much for that very inspiring presentation. I think there's a lot of takeaways from that. And we really want to see one favorite image from Hans before we wrap this up. So Hans, over to you.
Okay, I can try to share the screen, see if I can do that. Yes. Do you see my screen now, guys?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It's such a disgrace to your work, Hans. I'm sorry that they will limit you to one image. It's everybody should.
We'll have a
We
full
have
slot.
to get hands back.
I only need.
Get hands back.
We'll
I
have a
only
full
need
slot,
one
guys.
image.
We need to give him 2 hours.
Okay, I can show the one from our trip to Lofoten Kai. That was the one you didn't want me to show, wasn't it?
Beautiful.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
This was the morning at the coast of Vareid, and we had 1 day with good light, but that was a good day, for sure. So if you remember the shot Kai showed from the place, if you can, I guess you can recognize the shape of the mountains, the horizontal with a long exposure. I think Kai, you were standing left of me some meters, I think. Yeah. So this is actually a vertical panorama because I couldn't fit all of this into my wide angle. And the thing that really caught my eye here was the big swirl in the foreground. And the waves came crashing in from the right and kind of washed over into this little pool and did a spin and washed over the rocks and into the sea, pointing into the mountains in the background. So what I did first was I was taking my camera on tripod and tilting it down to include the foreground with the swirl. I think I used a shutter speed of 2 seconds or something to get the swirl right. And then I did some exposure with, I think it was half a second or something to get this wave motion on the rocks here. And I blended those two together in Photoshop. And then I tilted the camera a bit upwards. And then I took the picture of the background with the great sky we had that morning. So it's actually 2 horizontal images stacked on top of each other as a vertical panorama in Photoshop.
Hans, did you add any pink overlay or soft light on this?
Not much actually. I think there was a big mountain to the left of us, so the foreground was kind of in the shade. So this is cooler naturally than the background. I think that's actually to my advantage here that we have a cooler background and more warmth. A cooler foreground and more warmth in the background. So the eye kind of leads you naturally in. It all helps to lead you through the image.
The color palette is brilliant.
Yeah, I really like those. And I think that I did some color dodging from the left, where the light was coming in from, and also on the mountains. Make sure that the center mountain has the brightest part, so the eyes naturally goes there, not so bright on the sides here, because it's a kind of a symmetric centered composition here. Sometimes with these scenes I do a last step in the Nik collection and use the sky filter there.
Right.
That adds a bit more reddish pink to the highlights, and if you use that in a subtle way, that can work. But it's quite strong, so you have to be easy not to overdo it because you're gonna get strong magenta cast through the whole image. So that's a balancing act. Right. So I later now have very careful for trying to separate tones even more, and I cool down the shadows with the luminosity mask, and I warp the highlights also with the luminosity masks because they are so precise. So you can change the color tone and the temperature of the colors very specifically. So you don't want to actually do color works globally, other than maybe a white balance in Lightroom.
Right.
So I'm really happy with this. It was a struggle actually to get this image right, and there was a lot of waves that was big as well, and that splashed on the camera on the front lens, a lot of wiping, So I have to you have to be use a lot of time on locations like this to get them right. I actually left it for some minutes and tried to find some other things, but I came back to it, and I'm happy that I did, because I really love this image. And I remember that I sent images to KAI and some other guys, and to ask for feedback on the editing and so. I remember that we were discussing that. I think that you, KAI, meant that I could maybe crop out some of the sky, because this image was all about the swirl in the foreground. So those two elements don't compete against each other, to make it a bit more calm.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have a point there, but I mean, 4 days with full storm and 1 day with good light, KAI, it's hard to crop that out in the edit.
That's true.
I can relate to that feeling.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, guys, before we wrap this up? Himadri, Prakash?
No, we are fine. Looks like all answered.
Himadri, anything from you?
No, I'm good.
Jassi ji, anything? Any last comments?
I think I've taken birth today, and I'm just a few months old toddler. So once I start crawling and I have the strength and energy to start speaking or uttering my first word, then I'll ask them directly.
Okay. Okay. On that
They're
note,
wonderful images, and
let me thank KAI for accepting our invitation and spending so much time and going over all his images, explaining to us his perspective and how and the whys. And thank you, Hans, for accepting our invitation to be the guest. And we definitely want to see you on our show sometime in the near future.
Thanks.
So thank you, guys. Thank you, YouTubers. Thank you for staying with us for this long presentation.
Thank you.
Goodbye, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.